This is the sixth video for the April 23rd class. So we were talking about proxies, and we mentioned that when you create a model from proxies, it's far simpler for people to game it. This is because proxies are easier to manipulate than the complicated reality they represent. Consider the use of standardized testing in some schools. By itself, a test might measure legitimate metrics to determine academic success, but it can become problematic if teachers begin to teach students simply how to take the test. This undermines the meaning of the overall results, and eventually it's no longer an effective measure. This is the case with any ranking system that eventually creates its own distorted and dystopian economy. Algorithms that rely on models using specific metrics can be gamed to distort the results. Imagine, for example, that you knew if a hiring algorithm were more likely to recommend you if you went to a specific school or had a specific score on an aptitude test. If you were aware of what the algorithm were looking for, you could attempt to manipulate it to get the result that you wanted. This creates ethical problems for at least two significant reasons. One, it undermines the value of the original metric, eventually making the system into a pointless farce, and it creates opportunities for those who understand the model to exploit those who do not. Consider a simplistic but straightforward example. Imagine that an algorithm associates certain keywords in a resume and cover letter with competency and success and uses that as a basis to recommend hiring. Maybe it's true that people who tend to use those words really are well suited for the job, and so, all things being equal, they are reliable metrics for a good hire. However, if someone is familiar with the workings of the algorithm, either by having inside knowledge or by reverse engineering, they could sell these insights as a consulting service. People could pay for a service that would advise them that including these specific keywords in their resume will make the algorithm more likely to recommend you for the job. The problem is that if people start using those keywords merely because the algorithm is looking for them, it distorts the meaning of the metric. The algorithm is no longer making recommendations for the best choices, but rather for those who cater to the metrics. Eventually, the system becomes whether you can guess the right words rather than whether the words signify a quality employee. This makes the process pointless. The other problem is that those with insider knowledge can sell this information to those who can afford it. Not only does this create an unfair advantage for those who are well off, but the difference between a quality application and one that is merely manipulating the AI becomes arbitrary. You not only have to pay to learn how to use the system, but the system is broken in the first place. Those who will reap the rewards do so only because they can pay for an insider advantage and the system no longer promotes quality job hires. The situation is similar to what content creators deal with. YouTubers, for example, often attempt to chase the algorithm, trying to anticipate the features and qualities that a video must have in order to get widely recommended. Sometimes those features are widely known to be necessary for a recommendation, but often content creators can only guess using folk theories of what they think the algorithm is looking for. This might not only cause them to produce content in a way that doesn't fit their intended format, for example, more cuts and edits, shorter duration videos, but also encourages all creators to aim for the same thing. What ends up becoming popular becomes more about what the algorithm recommends to people rather than what people are actually willing to watch. Further, those who understand or claim to understand the algorithm can market their insights for a price in return for the promise of more clicks and views. The algorithm manipulates our behavior. We try to manipulate it back, and some can profit from selling manipulation techniques. In 2023, it was reported that the website CNET was deleting old articles in the hopes that it would improve its Google search results, despite Google later stating that this assumption about the algorithm was incorrect. As Kearns and Roth explain, algorithm design must specifically take into consideration how users might react to its recommendations, including trying to manipulate, defect, or cheat. We've already discussed the questions of whether an algorithm providing directions on a map should try to get you to act selflessly. But what if you wanted to manipulate it to be selfish? In 2015, there were reports of people reporting false traffic accidents or traffic jams to the app Waze to deliberately reroute traffic elsewhere. Anyone with an insider understanding of the rules of the algorithm can manipulate the system to their advantage. This highlights the importance of transparency and trust. We generally find it easier to trust an algorithm when it is more transparent, but as we discussed in Chapter 4, greater transparency comes at a cost. The more transparent you make the algorithm, the easier it becomes for users to manipulate it, and the greater the security risks. Finding the right balance between security, accountability, and manipulation will become more important the more such algorithms are used to begin to affect people's behavior. Now, there's also the risk that too much information will open the system to manipulation. Given the potential to the proxies of an algorithm to be manipulated, it may be easier to regularly reassess and evaluate the background assumptions and metrics underlying the model. So, this brings us to the conclusions. One prominent theme of this book is the moral responsibility for the development of science and technology. Artificial intelligence is a very new field, and that means that the long-term consequences of widespread adoption just simply aren't known yet. In this chapter on AI and humanity, we've discussed some of the consequences that AI can have for humanity when it is applied on a large scale. AI certainly has the potential to make our lives easier and more efficient in many ways, but it can also be incredibly disruptive. It has disrupted our understanding of privacy. There are massive financial incentives for corporations to collect as much personal data about customers as possible. Even the ability to subtly manipulate an algorithm can be lucrative. The ease and efficiency of AI threatens the livelihood of artists, designers, and writers, not to mention the potential that automation and AI could have for blue-collar workers. AI is also disrupting our social interactions and our perceptions of ourselves and others. We've considered at length the impact that AI can have for democracies, but clearly AI can affect us on a more personal and human level. Since algorithms can be adaptive, AI is capable of personally manipulating you in a way that we've never seen before. It can addict you, it can mislead you, it can allow others to manipulate you for their own ends. We've also discovered that AI can undermine our own cognitive abilities to understand the world around us. We will use AI on an increasingly wide scale, and we don't know the consequences. There are functions we want AI to perform, and who should be responsible for the harmful effects. The argument here is not that scientific or technological progress is a bad thing, or that disruption of social habits is necessarily a bad thing either. However, unchecked development of AI, particularly for commercial use, does present great potential risks to society. Change and progress are inevitable, but they can be managed in ways that better reflect society's interests at large, rather than the financial and scientific interests of comparatively few people. Perhaps this is why a robust democracy will be even more important, allowing the values and intentions behind AI development to reflect a larger social interest. However, until then, there remains a gap in terms of the moral responsibility for the development of technology that can harm society. This chapter has surveyed many, although certainly not all, issues where AI will have profound impacts on human society, and these are only initial investigation of topics where AI and humanity interact. Most of the long-term effects of what we considered haven't occurred yet, so we cannot make firm conclusions. However, this book does provide the fundamentals to start considering these problems at greater length and in more depth. If we understand, for example, how machine learning works and fits into a larger machine learning ecosystem, we can understand the fundamentals behind the attention economy. If we can critically understand the intentions and choices of developers, we can hold their background assumptions up for ethical scrutiny. As we've seen when considering privacy, addiction, deepfakes, and even AI consciousness, there are several ways of understanding and analyzing these problems. Some can be fruitful for moral inquiry, others less. We must be careful when carrying out ethical analysis how we understand and define the moral problems we are investigating so that we don't prejudice our conclusions. However, if we rely on our tools of inquiry, we should be able to critically evaluate these different perspectives. Thus, with the fundamentals of AI and ethical thinking understood, this chapter is not the final word on these issues, but rather an invitation and a valuable resource for readers to engage in further moral inquiries of their own. So this concludes our chapter discussion and actually the material in the book as well. I hope that you enjoyed it.